Once again, we welcome you to Moving Forward with Young Voices, and we're happy to welcome Iulia Lupse back to the program. And it hasn't been that long since we talked, but I know there are people meeting you for the very first time today. Iulia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me back on. I'm a political analyst, media strategist, and freelance journalist. And I cover everything from foreign policy to cultural issues. But the topic that we're going to talk about is very close to my heart, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, well, and I have to tell you, the first thing I see is, oh, this was published on the Foundation for Economic Education website. Love fee, absolutely love everything that they do. And here you are talking about how trade schools can beat a 4-year degree. That kind of goes against what was conventional wisdom for generations, right? The dream
Yeah.
is you go to college, you get a degree, and that's the key to opportunity. Talk to me about where the trade schools are making more and more sense.
Yeah, so basically, I think that because student loan debt in the US, I think it has surpassed 1.7 trillion. That's more than credit card debt, more than auto loans, and it's affecting everything from home ownership to even mental health. Um, the average degree holder holds about $38,000 in debt. Obviously, a lot more for many people. And that number is higher, especially with interest rates over time. Meanwhile, trade or technical programs average around $10,000, and that's a massive difference in not just what you owe, but how quickly you can get ahead. And I think people are starting to see that that graduates of trade schools often enter the workforce earlier. They begin earning sooner and start building savings and financial security without the burden of paying off loans into their 40s and even beyond. So yeah, that this matters even more now that we're seeing a shift in the labor market. Nurse practitioners, for example, I was looking at a statistic, I think are projected to grow by 46% by 2033. Wind turbine service technicians, 60% growth. So there are high demand, high growth fields, and many of them require less than 4 years of schooling. And I think people are starting to realize this, especially Gen Zers. A recent report found that 55% are now considering a career in the skilled trades, and that's up from 43 just in 2033. So yeah, I think especially more young people are recognizing that college isn't the only or even the most efficient path to success, especially in today's economy.
You know, we actually got to watch this process play out with our son. He's 24, just graduated, I guess it was a year ago, from a 2-year applied technology degree in green energy, which included wind turbines, that kind of thing. And we joke around. He got a job. Where I guess the long story short is that there's a lot of dairy waste
Mhm.
in places with high dairy concentrations. This is a green company that figures out how to process that and get all of the hydrocarbons out of it and sell it as natural gas.
Yeah.
Marvelous, marvelous use of green energy. But he was hired right out of school, put to work, earning good money. And I mean, we used to tease him about, oh, you got your forklift certified card with you. That's just kind of an inside joke. But the fact of the matter is, he's on very solid footing for
Yeah.
for his future. And he's young.
Yeah, and that's why it's a little bit, I mean, it's very personal to me as well because my family and I came to the US in 2005. And both of my parents had master's degrees back in Romania. But when we moved here, the degrees didn't hold the same weight. You had to recertify them, and that was expensive and complicated. So then my dad took a leap of faith and started his own plumbing business. And I think it really helped us to rebuild our lives here much faster. And then I went through the traditional path, graduated from college, got a quote unquote good job, moved to New York City, and I still found it pretty hard to make ends meet. And I was lucky, I had no student loan debt, I had some savings, but I saw how difficult it was, especially with the high cost of living. I saw my friends as well, tens of thousands in debt. They were unemployed or underemployed, burnt out. So it just made me think, is this the only way? And especially if you live in a place that is so expensive to live in, like New York City, for example, um, I think there's other paths that people should start exploring. It gives them more access to social mobility.
Let's talk for a moment too about, I don't want to throw all of higher education under the bus here, but there are some fields that people go into, and when I say they go into this with the understanding they're willing to take on thousands and thousands of dollars of student loan debt for a degree in something really kind of out there that's like, okay, what's the practical application of that in society, as opposed to some of these trade schools. You learn skills that are immediately useful or that will always be useful. Somebody who knows how to weld and fabricate,
Yeah.
there will
Yeah,
always be
exactly.
people looking for problems to be solved.
Yeah, and that's also there's another aspect to it because a lot of people, when you think of, for example, AI taking over jobs, you
Yes.
think of manufacturing or usually you hear about factory work, but and I'm not saying that any job is 100% AI proof, but it's not only AI is also transforming white collar industries. Like for example, in finance, AI can now automate data entry or generate financial reports. In law, we're seeing tools that can analyze contracts, marketing and media, blog posts, generating images, and those things used to require full teams. But on the other hand, at this point, I don't think we're at a point, or we will be anytime soon, where AI can cut your hair or install your HVAC system. You know what I mean? So these are jobs that like require dexterity and like a physical presence and human connections. And I think algorithms are far away from being able to replicate that at this point.
I, you must have anticipated, or you get asked that question a lot, because that was where I was wanting to go. Is how will AI affect this? And I really like your answer, because it's new opportunities are going to open up, but the people who keep the world running, and I'm not trying to put them above everybody else, but the people who know how to make electricity flow where it's needed to flow, who keep the water running, and all of that stuff, um, we take them so much for granted. And I think sometimes people forget that folks who go out there and get their hands dirty and who
Yeah.
work, they're doing an invaluable service. We just don't often see the end result as we, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
flip
And I
on the
think
light
it's
switch.
yeah, and it's definitely I think it's a little bit beyond like the economics and the job security aspect. There's a deeper, more human reason why I think people are turning into trades as well. Because I think how you, like you said, when your work involves like your hands, like building something, fixing something, caring for someone, it connects you with this reality in a way that office work doesn't. There, like you can actually, there's a tangible outcome to your labor. And I don't want to obviously trash white collar jobs. I think they're great as well, but there's something more like something more spiritual to it. You know, you can see it, you can touch it, and you know that you made a difference. And I think a lot of, like I said, a lot of young people are looking for more meaning to the work that they do.
I love how you put that. And it reminds me of a friend whose car broke down once out in the middle of like somewhere out near Bakersfield, California. I mean, it was out there in a place where you wouldn't want to be stuck, hot, dry. And this tow truck driver came to pick him up, and he says, to most people, they thought, well, you're a tow truck driver, you just go tow cars. This guy approached his job like, I am on a rescue mission. And it was just, and he loved it because he knew there were people in distress, and it's probably an S on his chest under his shirt, if you
Yeah.
could see it. Anyway, but a lot of it came down to the attitude. He loved his work because it wasn't drudgery.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I think, I mean, I really do hope that a lot more people start considering these options. It's not for everyone, just like college isn't for everyone. But I think that it does offer an easier way to get out of the debt trap, and to start working and earning faster and to also be more happy with your life in general.
That speech, I think every parent gave their kid the speech about a life of hard work and happiness. And we may have kind of shrugged that off, but there's something to be said. There's something very satisfying about being able to work hard and as you put it, know that you made a difference. Again, we're
Yeah.
talking with Iulia Lupse. Where can people best find you and your work?
So I'm on X, Yulia L 27, and Substack Unfiltered with Yulia, if you guys want to check out my work.
All right. Thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back. This is Moving Forward with Young Voices, and we are welcoming Ethan Watson back to the program. Been a little while? No, maybe it hasn't been that long since we talked, Ethan, but for people who are meeting you for the first time, take a second. Tell us who you are.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Ethan Watson. I'm a writer with the Young Voices program, which is a network of freedom-oriented and heterodox thinkers. I'm also going to be a law student coming up this fall at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, Arizona State. So very excited. I like writing on issues that affect Gen Z and the world we're growing up and entering.
I'm looking at an article of yours, Who Killed the High Trust Space? And I just want you to know, Ethan, this is remarkable. And I maybe this is strange, but I do think about what it means to live in a high trust, place or high trust society. For those who are hearing the term for the first time, when we say high trust, what does that refer to?
Sure, and I appreciate the compliment, Brian. And a high trust society is one in which there's low rates of crime, low rates of violence, basically where you don't fear for your life or your property when you're out and about going about your life. And so, for a lot of us, maybe that's our neighborhood, right? You leave, if you have kids, you let them play outside or whatever. We used to grow up hearing our grandparents talk about riding bicycles till the street lights came on, and no one ever got robbed. No one was ever getting, assaulted or mugged, or stranger danger was sort of a foreign concept then. And that was a really good way to live. You could be the most human you can be in those areas because you're not worried about, defending your own all the time. You can relax. You can say what you please. You can try new things. You can take risks a little bit. Those were a beautiful thing, and we still have them in our society to some degree, but they're a lot harder to come by. I find them in the most unlikely of places, the local rock climbing gym or my friend's amateur MMA fight. And really what creates that space is unity of purpose. Everyone is there for the same reason. Now, the places I just listed off, those are very trivial and superficial purposes, right? Things like sports or entertainment. We used to have a baseline level of agreement on the important things. Family values, hard work, meritocracy. And that was when we lived in a high trust society across the country.
Talk to me about what happened when Marxist ideology really found a toehold in our society.
So it originated in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement really was twisted and kind of corrupted by some bad actors because initially the narrative was, hey, this American system thing is really good. It doesn't let everybody in, and so we need to fix that. That's a perfectly noble goal, and I supported that. Or I support that. I wasn't around back then. But it got at some point the narrative changed and it became less we like this system, we want into we hate this system, we need to tear it down and invert it. And that's when things got really squirrely because then it divided society into an oppressor class and an oppressed class. So you've got one half of the society saying, man, my life is not as good as it could be. It's that other group's fault. And now I'm resentful. I'm more likely to engage in antisocial behavior, steal, hurt other people, be less considerate. Um, then the other party says, man, my life is pretty good, but I know there's a whole subset of the population that really, really doesn't think I deserve that. That makes you guarded and wary and suspicious and exclusive. Both of those put together create a low trust environment, which is what we see today. That's why when you go into Walmart, everyone's worried about people stealing the conditioner out of the out of the toiletries section, and they got to check your bag when you buy, two gallons of milk, because we don't trust that we share the same things anymore because we've been pitted against one another.
That's a good example. I'm just reflecting on. I walked into Home Depot for the first time in some time and was shocked at how everything was behind lock and key.
Right.
Well, if you want
Right.
that, you're going to have to go get a salesperson or a representative to come and unlock it for you. But
Hmm.
it shows that things have slipped. And of course, anybody who's spent any time on X or any other social media, we'll see things out of California where the laws even change to reflect, well, it's not that big of a deal. If
Right.
you only take this amount or less, you know, they can't even really
Right.
prosecute.
Right. And it's been born out of sort of a misplaced sense of we need to be compassionate towards people that maybe this system doesn't work for everybody because no system will work for everybody. Family life isn't for some people, religion's not for others. Some people make mistakes, lots of people make mistakes. So I think there's a compassionate impetus for this, right? People say, "Oh, we don't want to ruin people's life because they shoplifted something when they were a teenager." I understand that impulse, but treating things like shoplifting or other crimes as antisocial and that they sort of chip away at that social fabric over time is the right approach, and also the more compassionate approach, because it's compassionate to create a society that people trust one another in. That's actually the longer term compassionate thing to do. And I think we just, with the social upheavals of the 60s and then kind of down from there, we looked at a system that worked for like broad swaths of the population. Some people were on the fringes and not happy with it. And the solution wasn't to help them find their way into the realm of acceptability, but to say, we don't need to draw those lines anymore. And I think that's the wrong approach because now people are confused. The things they used to seek solace in, seek comfort in, family, faith, community organizations, those have all been flipped upside down. We have those instincts that we want those things still, but we haven't found those yet. And so everyone's just kind of unhappy and atomized and on Twitter saying mean things to each other, which is really quite depressing.
Ethan, talk to me about Gen Z, because I know not everybody may buy into generational archetypes, but it sounds like Gen Z really is they take things. How can I put this? Basically, they're taking things like their freedom, their independence, and so forth much more seriously than previous generations have. Um, are we more likely to see a high trust society if Gen Z continues to be? I guess I'll call them the voice of reason for lack of a phrase.
Well, I love that. I mean, I'm happy to be a part of the voice of reason, so I'll take that turn of phrase. But I certainly hope that Gen Z will be that agent of change. And I think you're seeing signs that we are, not because of our individualism, actually, which individualism is great and individual responsibility is extremely important. But I think my generation has realized that radical individualism, like all that matters is my desires, my wants, my needs, my own ideas. I'm so much smarter than anyone who came before me. That mentality has not really led us to a good place. It's led us to high rates of drug overdoses, alcoholism, suicides, things like that. So that's why you see my generation returning to things like the church, returning to things like clubs. You hear this phrase, "Get outside, touch grass." Right? We're returning to these high
Yes.
trust spaces. We're seeking them out where we can find them. These places where, wow, I feel really comfortable here because I know everyone here is here to go camping. Everyone is here to go rock climbing. Everyone is here to go to church. And that's why, I don't have to, you know, ask the security guard if I can have a cup of coffee. I just go get one. That's why, all the kids can play together and the parents can go enjoy themselves at church. We're seeking those spaces out because we felt that hole. And I think we're going to continue to do so.
Ethan, you recommend in this article a number of different places, the church, gym, neighborhood groups. Basically, you build your own high trust spaces, but you
Right.
also warn that you need to guard against the creep of divisive ideology. What can people do to hedge against that getting a hold of their group?
Right. I say you should invite people in, but do so prudently, right? Do so with the expectation of you're coming here to be a part of an organization, not change it. Don't insert your class or race or whatever based grievances and try to change this organization and progress it towards whatever you want. No, subordinate your own individual desires just for a second, give it a try, and enjoy something that other people have built and contribute to it. That's what I say will truly make my generation happy.
And I love how you end this article with, it's look, if you want to live in a society where kids can play safely together till the streetlights come on, then you got to build it
Right.
deliberately.
Right.
It's
Right.
not going to magically just fall into place. And oh, look, everybody, this is what happened. You have to be mindful. But I love your point that it can be done, and in fact, we've seen it before. So,
Mhm.
but
Right.
but it sounds like it starts at the individual level.
Certainly, certainly. And our society is truly an anomaly of history. Most humans today, even in the world, live under coercion, divisiveness, violence, fear. They can't really flourish and do the things that make our lives worth living. And so we need to really cultivate that and be intentional about it.
Again, we are talking with Ethan Watson. He is a Young Voices contributor and incoming O'Connor Fellow at Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University.
Thank you so much
And
for your time, Brian.
for those who want to follow you on social media, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me on X at ERWatson13. That's where I'm trying to grow my following and comment on current goings on. But always a pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much for the time.
All right, all the best to you too. Once again, welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. We're happy to welcome William Barclay back to the program. For those who are meeting you for the first time, give us a little bit of your background, and then let's dive headfirst into a topic.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a political theorist and a policy expert, as well as a recent graduate of the Young Voices Contributor Program. Thank you so much.
All right. Now, Will, I'm going to just let people know Will is also somebody who was given a last minute opportunity to fill in. So thank you for being available. But I know, having talked with you many times before, you're nimble, you're quick on your feet, and most importantly, really informed. I don't even have a title for the article summary that was sent to me, but talk to me about Islamic extremism in Canada. I've always assumed Canada was probably pretty safe compared to how deeply they're involved in various Islamic countries around the world. But what's their national relationship like with various Islamic groups?
Yeah, so I think that the big issue right now is that we've had a liberal government that has very much committed itself to abject diversity and hyper-liberal migration policies. And so we've accepted, I think, over the first quarter of 2025, over 817,000 people into the Canadian state. And it is simply impossible to adequately vet that number of people in such a short amount of time. And so what we've had happen here in Canada is we've had numerous dangerous vectors infiltrate Canadian society over the past decade of liberal government, and not the least of which has been various Islamic terrorists and terrorist leaders. And as a result, we've very much seen Islamic extremism and radical Islamic ideology gain a hold and grow exponentially in Canada over the past decade.
Just out of curiosity, is there a particular type of Islam? I know there are different sects of Islam, but help me get an understanding. Having known a handful of of Muslims, I feel very safe in saying that it's not a monolithic kind of religion. But who are the ones that are more likely to bring problems, from within their particular sect?
Well, so I think the problem is that in Canada, we've been importing terrorist leaders quite happily. I think we've had leaders from Sammy Dune and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, so PFLP.
Wow.
People like Khalid Barakat and Charlotte Cates have been allowed to gain a happy home in Canada. I think we even recently arrested a former Bin Laden associate here in Canada. And so, like you were saying, it's very much the issue isn't so much the different sects of Islam or kind of the necessarily religious beliefs per se, although they do certainly are at play here. It's very much the fact that the Canadian government has failed overwhelmingly to appropriately, let's say, regulate the influx of international migration into the Canadian state, and so we've had explicit, overt terrorist leaders allowed to make their homes here. It again, I think, in a way, transcends ideology when what you're doing is you're allowing to dangerous criminals and terrorists to live in your country freely.
Talk to me about how this compares to what we have seen happen in Europe, with the mass importation of lots and lots of, Muslims from various areas. I'm curious, does what happened, what's taken place with Canada's leadership, is this on a par with what we've seen happen in Europe, or is Europe a whole other scale of that kind of dynamic?
Well, I think that some of the numbers from Canada are truly staggering. I think we've had a nearly a dozen, I think, terrorism-related incidents have occurred in Canada or abroad involving Canadians since 2023 alone. I think we've had a 480% jump in terrorism charges laid in Canada over the last year alone. And so I think that although those numbers might seem staggering, states like France are definitely able to rival them. I think France itself has experienced more terrorist-related deaths than I think it's Algeria, Tanzania, and I think Iran even combined. But
Wow.
it's very much a multifaceted problem and something that, like you're saying, does afflict states all around the world. France has endured 53 major terrorist attacks over the past decade, and 66% of all terrorist attacks actually in the EU occurred on or on French soil. So I think that although Canada has experienced a huge jump, a surge in the number of terrorist attacks that it's experienced, the European states are definitely keeping up with us, and for many of the same reasons.
Talk to me about the Canadian political establishment. Do they tend to downplay the threat?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the most fundamental aspects of any modern leftist ideology is this commitment to a post-national state. And so the liberal government is very much accepted everything that comes along with their liberal migration policies. I think that Prime Minister Trudeau himself, before he departed, very much committed himself explicitly, and the liberal government, Canada itself, to this endeavor, becoming a post-national state. And so I do very much think that the liberal government has endeavored down this path very much explicitly, and often in order to kind of inflate their voter base and support.
Well, and that kind of answers where I was wanting to go next, which is what's in it for the political class when they allow very liberal, immigration and border policies. Obviously, they wouldn't do that if they didn't see a benefit. Is it simply about swelling the voting ranks, or are they confident that they'll have the support of those they let in?
Yeah, well, I think it's very much about swelling the voter ranks, but I think it's also about diluting, let's say, other political ideologies, and providing a decent amount of, let's say, background noise to blot out the earnest political discussion that is attempting to occur in Canada and other states. I think that by injecting so many inherently contradictory ideologies within any social confines, the ultimate result is very much volatility and social conflict. And so I think there's very much been an effort to inject this into Canadian society in order to propel their own agenda forward.
Is there enough of a groundswell of support from the Canadian people themselves that those in the new the new government, now that Trudeau is gone, are they likely to make the changes needed to happen here, or is this something that is like long term? Well, this is how we've always done things.
No, I think they're very firmly committed to the same endeavor. As I was saying, I think that we've accepted already 817,000, over 817,000 people into the Canadian state uh, within the first quarter of 2025 alone. And so that on its own would very much
Wow.
indicate to me that the Carney government and the liberal government going forward are very much committed to the same feats.
So I want to differentiate too between people who may be illegally in the country versus those who are, I'm going to use the term here, extremists, ones who actually bring with them an intention to cause trouble. How does Canada do it at sifting one from the other?
I think in a lot of ways we simply don't. Like I was saying, it's very much impossible to adequately vet and analyze over 800,000 people incoming to your country within the first quarter of a year. And so very much we simply don't attempt or even endeavor to adequately vet these people. Or even to make them leave, let's say, if they are legal migrants whose visa or whose permit has expired, we very much don't make an effort to even ask them to leave, let's say. We trust them to do that on their own, and I think that's very much been the system that's been adopted by the Liberal government, one of self-regulation.
Well, it certainly it feels as though the way that, for instance, the Trump administration and immigration and customs enforcement is enforcing immigration law. Maybe it's just being portrayed as super heavy-handed, but does the Canadian government, do they have the commitment if they had to become much more aggressive about it, would they do that?
Uh, I don't believe that they would do it at all. I think that again that in order to take that first step in kind of securing our borders and treating illegal migration and even international migration at all as a serious political phenomenon. I think we have to very much depart from that liberal government because they have again explicitly articulated their own commitment to transforming Canada into a post-national state. For over a decade, they've very much refused to secure our borders and have let swells of undocumented people into the country. And again, they've explicitly articulated their own belief that the influx of Islamic extremism into Canada and out of Canada into the US is really nothing more than fear mongering on the part of the Trump administration.
Well said. Again, we are talking with William Barclay. William, for those who are wanting to follow your work or otherwise connect with you on social media, how do they do so?
You can go ahead and follow me on Twitter or X at Will Barclay BBC. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Welcome back. This is our fourth and final segment today on Moving Forward with Young Voices. Happy to welcome Daniel Idfresne back to the program. Daniel, great to see you once again. For people meeting you for the first time, give us some of the basics about who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I'm Daniel Idfresne. I'm a student at Syracuse University and writer at Young Voices. I have bylines in Regular Politics, Town Hall, Fox News, Newsweek, and the like. And I typically write on Gen Z politics or New York City politics.
So, yeah, I'm looking at a headline here. A $20 mistake. At-risk teens will pay for Cuomo's wage hike. Can you give me some background on this? Were we talking about former Mayor Andrew Cuomo?
Former governor.
Or former
Andrew
governor,
Cuomo,
rather.
yes.
So what's the background here?
Yeah, so right now in New York City, we have a mayoral election. Right now we're in primary season and early voting has started. So if you're a New Yorker, go ahead and submit your ballot for who you think should be the Democratic nominee. If you're, registered as a Democrat, the minimum wage in New York City has been not necessarily a contentious point of debate within New York City because of the political affiliation of most people here, but the minimum wage does have ramifications for particularly younger New Yorkers in New York City compared to the rest of New York State and the rest of America. In fact, the labor force participation rate for young New Yorkers, we're talking age 16 to 24, is lower than the rest of New York State and the rest of the country. And the unemployment rate is higher, particularly after the pandemic. The numbers for young male New Yorkers, that their unemployment numbers have not necessarily rebounded after the pandemic, unlike, again, the rest of New York State and the rest of America. And I think at some point we have to have an honest conversation that, yeah, perhaps it is the minimum wage that is keeping young New Yorkers from entering the workforce.
Interesting. I'm curious. Are people just used to the higher prices that go along with, a higher minimum wage? It seems like didn't California just have kind of a similar experience with this? Well, we're going to bring our minimum wage to this level, and then it seems like a lot of the entry level jobs, particularly fast food, ended up doing like automated kiosks. So it's like it eliminated some of the entry level positions because of the minimum wage.
You're exactly right, Brian. Over in California, they raise the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour. And it's just as you said, businesses will prefer automation. Businesses, since immigration is a huge topic in the news cycle, they not only fast food restaurants, but other sort of blue collar, low skill jobs, employers may seek out illegal immigrants who they can pay for way less. A study over in Seattle showed that for a $20 minimum wage, or rather when the minimum wage was increased by 10%, the young minimum wage workers lost about $125 a month because they would lose hours they would have otherwise had if the minimum wage wasn't the way it is. And over in New York City, I mean, we don't necessarily, at this point, an intelligent policy discussion, one that is devoid of populist left rhetoric to, buy as many voters as possible, as we see with a certain candidate, Zoran Mamdani, who has offered free busing and freezing the rent for all New Yorkers, or for rent stabilized New Yorkers. If we legitimately had a conversation about the minimum wage, we could potentially even have a middle ground where if you're above a certain age, yes, you can have the $16.50 minimum wage. But if you're under 18, if you're a high school worker, then perhaps we should lower the minimum wage to at least get you into the workforce.
Yeah, you make actually a very strong case in this article about why it's important that teenagers have the opportunity to work, even if it's part-time. Let's maybe talk about that for just a moment.
Yes. So the reason why it's particularly important for young New Yorkers to, especially at-risk teens, to have their first job during high school, not full-time employment, right? Because a lot of the rhetoric surrounding working during high school is that, oh, like these kids are more likely to drop out, they're spending too much time working and whatnot, and they won't spend enough time on their academics. Studies show that if a high schooler has a part-time job, part-time engagement, right? We're not talking about 40 hours a week. They're able to build the soft skills. They're actually more engaged in school, and they're more likely to earn more money later on in life after college, right? And it's the same for college students who have a part-time job as well. And so, and and so while New York City, where we're supposed to be the city of dreams, and we have we have one of the largest, if not the largest, school district in the country. So we have a ton of children here, a ton of teenagers here. They're in the city of dreams, but they're unable to take that first step into accessing it. And we see now youth violence, youth delinquency is up with since 2018 per New York Times report. And I argue that part of that is that after school, and because they're unable to find those part-time engagements, devil hands to the idols work. It's a truism for a reason. And a lot of young New Yorkers end up finding themselves at risk, particularly at risk. Young New Yorkers find themselves, doing the devil's work because they have idle hands.
No, that makes perfect sense. I just have to wonder if there wouldn't be more employment opportunities if there was no minimum wage. And I know that's a very, in some circles, that would be a very controversial thing to suggest. What? Some jobs are worth less than $20 an hour? But the truth is a lot of them are, but they're not meant to be, a lifelong career either. Isn't it supposed to be it's an entry level, into the workforce, perfect for kids who, need to develop, some self-sufficiency in terms of their earning as well as that work ethic and responsibility.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is Thomas Sowell who said that the real minimum wage is zero, and so, and we're seeing that with young New Yorkers in particular. Yeah, we know that these young New Yorkers want the jobs. SYEP, New York City's summer youth employment program, typically is overloaded with applications. As a matter of fact, I'm a native New Yorker. I remember, applying for SYEP over the summer to get some sort of employment and get some sort of, income during the summer. So we know there's an appetite for it. And New York City has expanded its SYEP system. Now it serves over 100,000 New Yorkers, young New Yorkers in school. But now we need to have that conversation of how do we get these young New Yorkers employed year round. And if what Thomas Sowell says is true, the real minimum wage is zero. Again, we should at the very least, have an honest discussion about lowering the minimum wage for New Yorkers under 18 to give them that edge when it comes to applying.
Well, I'll tell you, Thomas Sowell is one of the few people I would doubt. I I think that guy's got it figured out. I'm curious if this affects the price of everything, or if automation, self checkout, that kind of thing, if that helps to balance things out. It seems like this would actually, the higher wage would mean fewer employees. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but I will say that it does factor in. Employee cost is one of the most, it's the most costliest part. It's the costliest part of being a business owner. And if all things considered, if you have to pay two separate New Yorkers $20 an hour, and you have somebody who's like older, 1 or 2 years of experience, probably a BA, versus a student who will not be able to be there for 40 hours a week, all things considered, you'll take the older person. But hopefully, it's unlikely, but hopefully at some point in the future, we have that honest discussion in New York City, the city of dreams. I remind you, we have a ton of young New Yorkers here. They should be able to have a chance to get into the workforce.
Again, we are talking with Daniel Idfresne. Daniel, for people who wish to follow you or find you on social media, how do they do it?
You can find me on X, Daniel Idfresne. My last name is a bit complex, Idfresne. And stay tuned for that. Follow me, and you'll see when I publish a new op-ed.